Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. Now, I know that I have been on a run lately with talking about business topics. We're talking sales, productivity, all the things to help you simplify being a better business owner. But let's shift gears a little bit, because the reality is we are not one-dimensional women, and there is other things in our life that really start to ripple out and affect every other aspect. So I want to talk about love. I want to talk about relationships. And I dare say, at the sake of sounding like an absolute vulnerable mess and wanting to hide behind the covers during this conversation, I will put myself out there a little bit more in the concept of really diving deep into what happens to women like us who are over-functioning, over-delivering, absolute people pleasers, and why we keep repeating the same negative patterns over and over and over again. So it's my delight to welcome to the podcast today, Terri Cole. She's a licensed psychotherapist and global leading expert in mindfulness, meditation, relationships, and well-being. For 2 decades, Terri has worked with some of the world's most well-known personalities, from international pop stars to Fortune 500 CEOs. She empowers over 100,000 women weekly through her platform, online community, and popular podcast, The Terri Cole Show. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Terri Cole. Hey, Terri.
Why, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
And I'm super scared to really get into this topic. Can I just put that disclaimer out there? Because as I start to really dive into my own journey and understanding what role I play in the love and the relationships that I attract in my life, this stuff's scary, Terri. I mean, you start to uncover parts of your personality that you just didn't realize were there. How did you stumble upon this work in your own life and in your practice?
Well, so much of where I am now really started as my own personal journey in life, psychologically, emotionally. I got into therapy very young, when I was 19 years old, when I was still in college. I stopped drinking when I was 21, which had a lot to do with where I ended up. And I realized at a very young age that we are kind of all making it up as we go along. And that it didn't really matter what happened before. Through this process of working on my mental health and understanding my unconscious mind, what I was repeating, what I now call your downloaded blueprints around love, boundaries, money, everything, that I could actually not just say, well, I don't like this hand I was dealt. I could say, I don't like this hand. I don't like this deck. I'm making up a new game that is going to be my life. And it was so inspiring to me that eventually, after a different career, I became a psychotherapist, because I thought, wow, I've really created my life from the ground up through a lot of hard work and painful, scary stuff, as you were talking about before. So I feel you, but that it's possible. And I was like, man, if I can do this, honestly, anyone can do this, because I'm not so special. I'm just like you. I'm just like all of the women who listen to your show. What do we want? We want juicy, vibrant love. We want success. We want to be good. We want to do well. We want to add value. But we want to do it without doing it at the expense of ourselves, our own mental health, our own physical well-being. And because of the way we've been socialized and basically trained, consciously and unconsciously, overtly and covertly, there's a lot of things we got to get from the basement of your mind, which is your subconscious, your unconscious, to the main part of the house, so that you can go, oh my gosh, wait, that's what's happening? Who knew? Once you know, then you can become empowered and do something about it. I think when it comes to love and boundaries, these are things that we just feel stuck, and we're such overfunctioners, and we're very smart, and we know how to negotiate systems, and we're like, how come I cannot figure out the love thing? What? How? There's got to be a way. Like, I can do anything. Why not that? Because it isn't just about your forward motion and the amount of work you're willing to do. It's about deeply understanding yourself, and that is painful to have to look at life and childhood and experiences,
Yeah. And, it's funny too, because I think about the antiquated advice that you get in, say, health and fitness. Well, if you just exercise more, if you put more effort into it, you're going to reap greater benefits. But I think in your work and what I'm starting to learn myself is that it's not about putting more effort in. In fact, that's counterintuitive, because what happens is people pleasers, or over functioning, over delivering people, as you like to say, we try to do it all for everybody else around us, our spouses, our children, our friends, our coworkers. Oh, well, if I just put more to it, then it will be better, which is false. Why is that?
Well, we want to make it better, and that's a true and authentic desire. And that has been our winning formula for a long time.
Yep.
I mean, mine was, before I got healthy in my own life in my 20s, mine was like, I'll just do it longer and harder. I just will never give up on whatever it is I want to do. But what ends up happening is that when you're a young woman, like that's a young woman's game to a degree.
Yeah.
You don't realize until you're older and have the experience. Now I have decades of experience that shows me, and thousands of clients, just like you, just like your listeners, over 22 years of being a licensed psychotherapist, that there's only so long that we can be kind of last on our list. Because what ends up happening, like I like to say, it's sort of whether you mean to or not, you eventually become a martyr. You think you won't. You think you're doing it from free will, but eventually, and that train, right, that the martyr train only has one stop called Bitterland, because that is how you will end up. You think you won't, but the truth is there's only so long that you can give from an empty bucket without being like, hi, what about me? And I say to my clients, yeah, man, what about you? Let me teach you how to not be last on your list, so that your giving is not from fear, is not from a desire to be perfect, is not from the way it looks, not from, having the disease to please, but your giving is from choice, is from, you have equanimity, right? You're giving with love because you want to, not because you're afraid that if you don't, you won't be loved, or you won't be loved, or you won't be useful.
Or you'll be abandoned, or
of course,
left.
Rejected.
Yeah.
Criticized.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think when you start to awaken to these things, it's shocking. And I will say that for me, I'm starting to awaken to my own negative patterns that, and I keep going, well, why? Why don't they do the same that I get? I pour so much into them and I get so little back. Once you start to realize that that role is no longer serving you and that there is a better way, that's where I want to get to today. So you mentioned on your website and in your work, and I'd like to just sort of put this out here first. So go ahead and raise your hand right now if you're listening and if any of these describe you, because my hand's just going to be up the entire time. You always over-deliver. Over-functioning, as in being responsible for everyone and everything in your life, is literally your normal. You say yes when you really want to say no in life, or even in work with your clients. You repeat these unhealthy relationship patterns, or you keep dating the same guy or girl or whatever, and you keep going, well, why am I still so unfulfilled or so unhappy? You beat yourself up for not having it all figured out. That's in air quotes there. Like, oh, God, I'm 42. Why am I still struggling with this? That kind of thing. So if any of those resonate with you, keep listening on, because I hope that Terri will start to simplify this stuff down and break it down. So why is it that we as over-functioning, over-delivering women and people pleasers tend to fall into these unhealthy relationship habits? Like, are we part of the problem? Are we attracting that type of person who only wants to be with that kind of person?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because how can you're not part of the problem.
Yeah.
You are the problem because it's your life. So let's take the blame vibe off of that.
Yeah.
And really pivot towards how incredibly empowering that actually is if you reframe it. You are the common denominator in your life. It can only be about you, right? It can literally, now, a relationship itself is 50% you and 50% the other person. But who you are attracting on a regular basis can literally only be about you. So let's simplify it down to, first of all, you've got to get rid of the mean inner chick. You've got to get rid of all of this perfectionism bullcrap.
Yeah.
Because there's no place for it in emotional growth. We have to be as kind to ourselves as we are to everyone else in our life. We need to talk to ourselves inside and outside the way we would talk to a 5-year-old child that we adore. You would never be so blamey, so mean, so perfectionistic, pointing out all the wrong things. You would never be comparing and despairing. A 5-year-old you love, would you be like, why can't you be more like Susie? She's so much prettier than you.
Yeah.
Would you ever say that?
No. Yeah.
Of course not. So part of it is so much of the work that I do and the pillars, and we'll get into that later, but I've created the 5 pillars of real love, what that looks like. Because I basically took what I've been doing for 22 years and I'm like, there's a way that this happens. What if I could sort of strategize, or I could create a method around that way, so that smart women all over the world don't need to have 2 decades of therapy to figure this crap out. They're so coachable. You're so coachable. Your audience is so coachable. I'm so coachable.
Yes.
So I knew it, even though other therapists think I'm nuts for what I do. I don't care. I'm like, listen, I know my people. I know my audience. They just need an amazing GPS to get to their own answers. So I do not claim, not in this podcast, not in any podcast, not in anything I teach, to have your answers. But I do know where your answers are, which is that is what you need as a listener. That is what you need, is to go, okay, what am I looking for? Because it's so confusing and overwhelming if you don't understand the process. So yes, it's about you. I call this, these are repeating, right? I call this, you have a downloaded love blueprint. And these are repeating relationship realities, I call them. So when you find yourself kind of with the same person, similar person, could be different. Sometimes we do the extremes, but most of the time, especially when we're overfunctioners, we end up doing more of the emotional labor in a relationship. We keep it all together. We are driving the ship. We're remembering all the things. If you're someone who's in a relationship, you probably have a better relationship with your spouse's parents than they do. You just keep it going. You remember all the birthdays, all the things, all the doctors, all the what we got to do. This, that takes up a lot of bandwidth. What happens is that we are training the people in our lives that we will effing do it all. We'll do it while we go to Soul Cycle. We'll do it backwards in heels, as Ginger Rogers did.
Right.
We'll do it all. Like, how can I add value to your life and make it easy for you?
Yeah.
What ends up happening, though, is that when we're over-functioning, many times we will be attracting under-functioners. And we can even take a high-functioning person and make them an under-functioner. Because we're like, no, I got it. It's cool. Quick story about this in my life. So, my quick backstory is I didn't ever want to get married. Didn't think I was going to get married. My parents' marriage was like, meh, not the worst. My mother had an affair with her boss when I was about 12 or maybe 11, because they didn't get divorced till I was 13. And so my feeling was, nah, like I can do meh by myself. I don't need that. And the covert and overt messages I got from my mother for sure were, get an education, make your own money, so that love can be a choice and not a need, or a choice and not a prison, which is what I feel like she felt. She got pregnant. She worked at a factory to basically make enough money, because both my parents grew up poor, to go to college, got into college, and in her first semester got pregnant with my oldest sister and had to drop out. And was like so grateful. And my parents were like high school sweethearts. It wasn't like she just met him, but she was so grateful he married her.
Yeah.
So she never went back to college. So my whole thing was like, wow, marriage is like limits you. Marriage is like this little prison that I could probably do without. Like, I'm cool. I'll have lovers. I'll do whatever. And I was born in a different era, so I didn't have to do that. And because my mother didn't care, she was the main influencer in my life. She was like, go you, do your thing, you know? So back to what I was saying about overfunctioning, that when I was in the beginning of the relationship with my husband, when I was already in my 30s, because, I was like, whatever with marriage, all my friends from home were married. A lot of my more professional friends were not.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to my mother about Vic, and I was like, my husband, his name is Victor, but I call him Vic. And I said, this guy always wants to drive into the city to pick me up just to drive back to New Jersey. It just is not efficient. It doesn't make sense. I could just get on a 20-minute train. And my mother was like, Terri, let him do for you. He wants to come get you. He says, because he used to always say, let me just come scoop you up. It won't take long. And she was like, don't you want to be scooped up? And I was like, I don't know. I never thought about it, but maybe. And she's like, doesn't it feel good? And I was like, I don't know, because I've never let anyone do it. So she's like, maybe, Tara, do this one differently. Maybe let him add value to your life. Maybe allow. And I was like, well, that would be weird and different, but okay.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of shifting and realizing that in all these other relationships, I was doing what you're describing so well, Mary, saying, I'll do it all. I've got it all planned.
Mm-hmm. I'll overcompensate for your lack, all the things. Yeah.
Yes. And the thing is, did that person have lack in my life? I could see how I trained perfectly capable partners to be unduly dependent on me doing things, and then how friggin' resentful I became. I'm like, well, he can't do that? My mother's like, well, how many times did he try to do it? And did you either criticize the way he did it, or did you say, don't worry, I got it? Mm-hmm. We're so used to being like, it's all good. I'm not fussy. No problem. I mean, anybody? Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. I got it. My mother's like, maybe you don't want to have it all the time. Maybe let him get something. And this is a shift. And so before we get into, and the way that I teach this in my course on love, the Real Love Revolution, all of this stuff is, it's all about focusing on ourselves first. We have to deeply understand our downloaded love blueprint, what we saw, what we learned, how we are unconsciously identifying who are appropriate partner type people, how we want to identify with our parent. Like, I didn't, we have all these weird things unconsciously. Like, we don't want to sometimes unconsciously do better than our parents. What happens if I did figure out the love thing and my mother never did? Well, am I going to get kicked out of my little family tribe? I have 3 older sisters and my mother, and we're all very close. Yeah. All very female, right? Am I going to get kicked out if I do it better than them? And I'm the youngest. Yeah. So these are all things that you wouldn't know to think about. So anyone who's listening, who's like beating themselves up, and you, for not quote unquote figuring it out, hey man, let's just be grateful. Yet nobody taught you this. You shouldn't just know. We're not born knowing it. But you can definitely learn. You can learn.
And that's what I feel like right now in my own journey in the last couple of years as well, is that all it takes is somebody like you, Terri, to kind of show a little bit of a crack in the system and go, well, hang on, have you thought about this? And then the light starts to come through the crack, and then you go, oh, that's been causing all of these negative patterns and things that are happening. I remember listening to one of your episodes, I believe it was episode 181 on, are you codependent or are you caring? And you had mentioned something along the lines that in your own childhood, you were the helper. You were the gold star kid, the one that came in and saved the day in your own family dynamic. And I think that I can resonate with that, certainly. That was me. I had the sticker chart. I did come to the rescue to my parents, my brother, all the things. And I think that there are these anchors in our lives, whether that is part of your story or other elements where you received reward or recognition or acknowledgement for your helperness. And that felt good in that moment. So it's like, well, I just want to be more of this. I want to do this on a grander scale in all aspects of your life. And I think as a Libra, I try to think about things in a balanced way. But I think where I go unhealthy is that balance tips. And I go, well, I'm just going to be the helper for all people at all times, all of my clients. I'm going to do all the heavy lifting because then they don't have to. And that's me helping the world. But in fact, I'm deteriorating slowly on my side, right?
Yep. You are. And I can tell you what it looks like in 10 years from now or 15 years from now. It looks like what happened for me, what stopped my thing was cancer.
Yeah.
So I had that journey, which, it's long. I don't think we need to get into it other than it was something that I finally stopped because I wouldn't stop. So the universe was like tapping and tapping, and then finally just picked me up and threw me down a flight of cancer stairs because it was time to stop and to do something different. And that if I continued going that way, I would be burnt out. So what I saw years later as a psychotherapist is a lot of autoimmune disorders and other diagnoses, depression, exhaustion, shadow addictions, I call them, where you're so high functioning that like you're not going to work, but you're drinking 3 to 4 glasses of wine a night to numb feelings you don't want to feel. And so these are all the things that if we don't stop and go, okay, I need to figure this out. Like, I want to figure this out. It's time for me to put this massive bandwidth that I've been pouring into other people in the world into myself and understanding. So I'm going to give your listeners right now a quick tip that they can use because I know we're simplifying on our podcast today, because this can be complicated, like in the way of what we're talking about can seem overwhelming, but I promise you it's not. And that there's always the next right action and the next right action. And I know that you can all understand that. So when you look and go, wow, I have had the same relationships with the same people, and I kind of end up having the same problems with those people over and over again. So I say my theory on that, and I guess it's more than a theory because it's been proven a million times, is that this is a repeating relationship reality. And so when you have that experience, what does that look like? What do we want to do? Well, we need to go, well, what am I repeating? Why does it matter what I'm repeating? But I do want to know, and I'm going to tell you both of those things. How to identify what you're repeating and why it matters. So I came up with these, I call it the 3 Qs tool. So 3 questions that you can write down and ask yourself anytime you're in a sticky situation, an unsatisfying situation, especially when it's repeated, or especially when you have a super hot response to something where you go, that could not be about a cab driver. I just lost my shit on somebody. That has to be about something deeper. So, and that's, therapeutically, we call that having a transference or displaced aggression. Okay.
Yeah.
But the 3 questions that I'm going to give you right now can be helpful in where we really use them in my courses is when we have these repeated realities that we go, but I don't want to keep repeating this. This is not working for me. I'm not happy with this. So the first question is you look at the situation, think about old relationships, and listeners right now, you can think about an old relationship where you're like, wow, this was a lot like the one before and the one before that, or a repeated conflict, let's say in a work situation. I had a client who always had an arch enemy at work. Didn't matter where she worked. So by the 3rd time that she was in an office and she was like, and I hate Betty. I was like, okay, this is, what are you hating on anyone you work, like, you don't even love them. How can you hate them? And she was like, I'm sure this happens to everyone. I was like, no. Definitely not. This does not happen to everyone. This has never happened to me. This is definitely you. And then we figured out what she was repeating. So here are the questions.
Yeah.
When you think about that relationship, the first question is super easy. Who does this person remind me of? And it could be energetically, it could be physically, it could be mannerisms, it could be how they interact, what they're saying. The second one is, how is this relationship, how is the dynamic familiar to me, right? How is the way we're interacting, how I feel, how is it familiar to me? Because it could be something you saw. It doesn't have to be that you were in that dynamic. Maybe why it's familiar is that in that dynamic, you were playing out something that you saw your parents do, right? It doesn't have to be that. And so what I say, who does this person remind me of? Why is this familiar to me? And where have I felt like this before? So then we're trying to sort of identify past things. We're like, a lot of times people will say, oh, my last relationship. I'm like, right, go back further. Keep going back. Yeah. Keep going back. Because if something is being repeated a bunch of times, it's usually an earlier injury, unless the injury in the adult, even young adulthood, was super traumatic, then it could be that. And then I'll add a little additional thing that I think is very helpful. So let's say you ask those questions and you're like, I'm not really sure. This last one is usually helpful, which is when I'm interacting with my significant other, who do I become?
Yeah.
And who do they become? So you may become your 10-year-old self. They may become your parent. You may become your mother. They may become your father. In the way they're behaving. Obviously, you're not actually becoming those people. It's about who is being represented.
Right.
So why do we care? Why do we care what's happening? Because as this is based on Freud's theory of repetition compulsion. So I basically extrapolated on his theory. I'm sure he doesn't care. He's already dead. Maybe he would probably care because he was quite a misogynist. But anyway, I saw it too much to not think it mattered.
Yeah.
In my own life, but it was figuring out my own life. And then I thought, well, maybe it's just me. Then I became a psychotherapist and I was like, holy crap, but it's definitely not just me. It is all of these women. And what I would see is that when we could identify, sometimes just acknowledging like, oh my God, I've been repeating my parents' relationship. I don't even want to. Right. Why? It's just like all the funny things we say, like, oh, you're going to become your parents whether you want to or not. And my feeling is without any intervention, you most likely will. Because this is what we have as a model of behavior. Unconsciously, we're identified. This is what being feminine looks like. This is what being a good woman, a good person is. We should be selfless. We should overgive. We should forgive. Let's just say that the dysfunctional thing that you're repeating is being too forgiving, having very disordered boundaries or weak boundaries with other people. We unconsciously are repeating this because we think this is good. Even though consciously you're like, why can't I figure this out? So imagine that if we could get all that crap, and you can, one next right action, from the basement of your mind, your unconscious mind, into the main part of the house, you're able to tell yourself when you have this response like, oh, hey, you know what? I don't need to do this. This person is not my brother who was incapable or my unwell sister. Sometimes we were the caregiver because we had a sick person in our family, so we had to overfunction for someone else. And now is not then. So I just did a couple of weeks ago, I did a episode of the Terri Cole show on transference and how now is not then. And that's part of what we're talking about is transference is responding in this moment fueled by an unresolved injury from the past. So it's basically streaking our perception with unresolved stuff. So we can't see clearly because of that. But there are simple ways to go back and go, okay. So in everything that I teach, I always give integration questions and journal prompts and things that you got to be brave, though.
Yeah. And I think that that's it. I think that remembering and having tools at your disposal in the present to keep yourself grounded in the reality of the present rather than, because I'll be the first to admit, I let past data points that have been anchored down in my brain of like, this is what a relationship is. This is what a successful business owner is. This is what, a woman is or is not. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's those data points that you have dropped down into your archives in your brain. But I think the good news, what I've learned from you definitely, is that no matter what age you're listening to this episode, you have the ability to make a new choice today. And you can start to unlearn some of this stuff, what you call like your racket, like the thing that is that negative thought patterns and the stuff that keeps anchoring you down to repeat those unhealthy patterns. And also, I think that there's a little bit of grace in this, right? That's where grace comes in. And I've really embraced that word myself in the last couple of years as well. Grace is not weakness. Grace is a gift to start to let go of some of these anchors and start to put in new thoughts, new beliefs, and new healthy patterns to move forward with.
Agreed.
So can we go into the 5 pillars now?
Sure.
You talk about the 5 pillars of self-mastery that really help us invite real love into our lives. And by the way, you have, just if you're listening at home, she has a 10-week coaching program called the Real Love Revolution, which we'll talk a little bit more later. But this is kind of giving you a highlight of the work that you do out there in the world. So let's break them down. 5 pillars. What are they?
Okay. So the first one is self-awareness, right? Because how can we change anything that we're unaware of? We can't. And so there's a very guided way and a safe way that I guide you to really raise your self-awareness. The questions, what we're talking about today. This is awareness raising stuff. There's a lot of inquiry. Yeah. And then we move into the second pillar, which is self-knowledge, which is basically requires us to kind of put away, you know, in life how we have like a fake memory drawer. They're like snapshots that you saw, stories that you heard. And then there's like the real memory drawer, the one that we never want to go into because some not great stuff is in that drawer.
Yeah.
Self-knowledge is required for us to heal and grow and actually be liberated enough to create the life, the relationship, the career, the abundance that we want, is all based, in my estimation, on these pillars. So real self-knowledge, even if it ain't pretty, what happened? Accepting that we are not blaming our folks. All the work that I do, I make the generous assumption, so does all of my students, that our parents did the best they could with the consciousness they had at the time.
Yeah.
And what you're really doing by being willing to be truthful to yourself is you're also liberating yourself from a lot of unconscious resentment. You might be dutiful, but if you are not processing this crap and honoring it, somewhere down deep, you're resentful as hell and it's coming out. So you really create an opening to have a more real relationship with your caregivers or the people who raised you by accepting your own humanness throughout this process, which we do, and just accepting them. You know, Louise Hay had this great thing. She says, you know, I accept my parents for the wounded children that they are.
Yeah.
Like, they just are. They just this and they just did the best they could. And it doesn't mean you need to, if you have a narcissistic parent, that is not to say you should reconcile with them. You must have a relationship with them. It's to basically give yourself and the child within you the freedom to do this work, to embrace this work without feeling disloyal, afraid, guilty. And within my courses, we handle those emotions. All will come up, obviously, which is why most people don't want to do this work, but we handle them as they do. So self-knowledge, super important. And then we move into the third pillar, which is self-acceptance. We really look at how was your life. So in all of my courses, because I don't know how to do it differently because I'm a licensed psychotherapist. Of course, they're not therapy, obviously. Yeah. They're virtual, they're online. I have women from 25 countries in them.
Yeah.
But it is therapeutically designed coaching courses. So the acceptance of what happened, what actually happened, how that really impacted you has so much to do with taking care of the child within all of us. And before I did this work, if you had talked about child within work, I would have been like, yeah, okay, great, whatever, John Bradshaw. But then, of course, I became a psychotherapist and was like, oh my God, it's everything. It is all the things. It all goes back to it. It is so real.
Right. It sets
Because
your values and your tone right from an early age. Yeah. And I think that that's the part of grace, right? Is that you don't realize that some of these things, like you say, are so unconscious, and that's just how you believe life to be. I mean, let's take from a very extreme point of view, like say you grew up in a household of drug addicts. And that's all you knew life was to be. So as a child, you were making breakfast, cleaning the house, taking care of your young siblings, all of the things. Yeah, you don't know any better, And I think that that's sometimes the grace that we all have to remember of, like, your parents also probably didn't know any better when they also started making choices. And I know for me, I now have kids, and I think that where I find the hope in this work is that the pattern doesn't have to continue to happen and transfer down to your children, that you do have a choice in this, and that is really an incredible thing.
Right, but it requires you to slow down.
Yeah.
Focus on yourself. Realize that your winning formula has a cost that's too high, and you'll still be successful. Trust me. Mm-hmm. I did it. You can do it. Like, I'm living proof, and I have thousands of women across the world who are so much more satisfied, calm in their life, not driven by fear. I used to think my ambition personally was like, I'm just ambitious. I realized through my own process that I wasn't running towards something like I told myself. I was running away from something.
Yeah.
And when I finally had the courage and the skills from therapy to turn around and take a look, I was like, oh, this is not as bad as I thought. So we move into the third, right? So this is self-acceptance, because you can't be in denial and heal.
Yep.
And then the fourth, and I find this one to probably be the most difficult for the women in my crew, is self-compassion. Just give yourself a break. Just have compassion for what you experienced, right?
Yeah.
Stop thinking you should be doing more or better or be thinner or be prettier or be more successful or have more money. Stop being mean to yourself. Have compassion for where you are, for how much you've done, for how capable, how kind, how amazing you are. We don't brag enough. You got to brag. You got to know what's right about you. Stop fighting for your limitations. Stop telling people what's wrong with you. Stop it. Compassion, self-compassion. Rest when you're friggin' tired. Mm-hmm. Give yourself a break. Breathe, meditate, grow. Think that you value yourself, not just the value that you can add to the lives of others. That you are lovable and valuable exactly as you are, simply by virtue of being alive. Stop thinking you have to twist yourself up in a pretzel and light yourself on fire and throw a parade and make dinner. We don't expect this from babies. Do you expect your 2-year-old to make you dinner? Well, if you do that, then maybe I'll love you. No, They don't do anything. We just love them. Yeah. They don't even add any value. All they do is eat, sleep, poop, and cry. I mean, come on. So you really do deserve your own compassion. And without it, it's very difficult to create the life that you want. Because we end up with people who they look to us. We're setting the bar. And they're like, oh, yeah, she can do more. She can handle more. She can do this. Mm-hmm. It's like the way you talk about yourself. Yeah. Then other people start, oh, yeah, right. She calls herself Thunder Thighs. It's kind of funny. It's not funny at all. Yeah. It isn't cute. It's your way of trying to not threaten other people. Stop it. Stop it, please. You're amazing and you're beautiful. You're a goddess. Allow that to be true for you, because it's all so subjective. Why think that you always got to be doing more? Look at what you've already done. This is what self-compassion in action looks like. And then the last piece, and it's kind of a dual piece, which is self-love, real self-love, which is not a thing, which is not a concept. It is a friggin' lifestyle that every day when you actually love yourself, you make choices that are loving to you. You say no. You look at your VIP section in your life and you're like, how did all these mother effers get in here?
Yeah.
Get out.
Time to clear house.
Discerning, about who gets to be close to you, who gets your time, who do you rearrange your life for? It can't be everyone.
Yeah.
It's got to be people who fuel you, who feed you, who energize you, and who see you, actually see you. But people can only see you when you allow yourself to be seen. So it is self-mastery, self-love, and self-celebration are all that last module where we do a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I know that was a lot. Wow.
It is a lot, but I appreciate the simplicity in breaking it down into 5 pillars, because I think that there is a pattern to that, and there is a framework that you can't hop, skip, and jump over one pillar straight to self-love. Self-love isn't a to-do list, tick off checklist, It is something that it takes methodology, and it takes time and takes grace going from one pillar to the next. So, I think what I hear in this is self-awareness is realizing the current present, giving loving kindness to understanding what the anchors are and as you say, your racket and the things that are holding you back. Knowledge is building that. And you mentioned in your work how, to see it and to say it and to sense it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that in particular, like how that helps create positive outcomes in our life?
Well, part of it is that visualization is real. We're all made of energy. What you think about the most is what you're going to bring into your life. Why do you think they say that the 5 people that you spend the most time with have this huge impact on what happens in your life? So every single thing that ever happened in the world started as a thought in someone's mind. It didn't exist until they thought it. So everything you want, you have to, at the very least, be able to visualize it.
Yeah.
And I always take it one step further. It's not just visualizing it. It's feeling the feelings of having what you want. Feel the feelings of being in a mutual, amazing relationship if it's love that you want. Allowing someone to take care of you, right? And you take care of them. Feel the feelings of having that. Sometimes people say, well, I've never had it. I'm like, yeah, but you can imagine how friggin' good it would feel. It doesn't matter if you haven't had it.
Yeah.
Of course you can imagine it. Someone who values you. Someone who asks you how your day was and then shuts up so they listen. Someone who doesn't give you unasked for advice and criticism. Yeah. Someone who thinks your body is beautiful the way it is. Someone who listens to you, respects you, remembers what you talk about. That's what being really loved feels like.
Yeah.
A best friend who you also want to have sex with, according to Terri Cole. Other people will have other ideas. That's what I have. That's what I didn't even know existed until I started visualizing. I just thought it was always about managing the other person. I learned from my mother that men are people to be managed. P.S. That's it. Not to be heart connection, best friend, to be really vulnerable. What are you, nuts? They were the other. They were the people that you had to make them think they knew what was going on, but they really didn't. Like, not the best. So, I just got off course. What am I talking about?
No, it's the truth. Because I think also...
Oh, visualizing, yeah.
Yes, I think when we see it, say it, and sense it, I think that that's such an incredible framework to think about, because when you're creating visualizations and understanding there is a better reality out there. I also wonder, Terri, if women of a certain age and certain generation who have parents who are, my mother's 79 at the time of this recording, they do come from a different generation where it's all about taking care of the man and taking care of the household and make it all look pretty, sweep it all under the rug. And I think we also are a very interesting generation in that when I was a kid of the 70s and 80s, I was told you can do anything, you can be anything. Now go out there and do all the things. Do all of them, Mary. And I think that there is a rub between what my mom's beliefs are and what my indoctrined beliefs are, because I'm trying to do all the things and also do all of her things as well.
Yep. We are the generation in between, even though I'm a bit older than you, where they didn't say, well, now go out and save the world and change the world and build your empire and make a lot of money and add value to the world. They didn't then take any of the other crap off of our plates.
Yeah.
So part of it is realizing. I also did something about emotional labor not that long ago, a vlog about how to stop doing it all.
Yeah.
Because so much of it is invisible. So much of what we do, literally the people in our life think it happens magically. I mean, not me in my marriage, because it is very equitable. And if anyone does more, it's my husband, for sure.
Yeah.
But part of it is, if we get our identification of being female from doing all the things our mothers did, it's hard to give them up. You have to go, hey, if my partner, my spouse, my husband, my wife is going to help, I can't micromanage the crap out of how they're helping.
Yeah.
So you got to write down what I suggested, because I read this in an article, actually, that was very interesting, is that you write down all of the emotional labor that you're doing in your life and in your partnership. If you're the point person for everything. So like in this article that I read, the woman was like, my husband's an engineer. It's not like he's not smart.
Yeah.
And he wanted to cancel the dog walker and was like, so can you text the dog walker? She was like, hey, here's her number. You can text her.
Right.
But
you're fully capable.
So used to it. Yes. And also being in triangles with people, because we're the backbone of all the things, but it's at a cost. There's only so much bandwidth. And yeah, you can do it when you're 25 and even 35, 45, 55. I don't know. You don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
So part of it is, yes, we're in the middle, but when you start to really look at what you're doing, why you're doing it. When I opted out of being the hero child in my family of origin, I had to, through therapy, be like, okay, so I have to give up being the center of the family. I have to give that up.
Yeah.
Or I have to keep organizing all the things and always being the one buying the present and always making sure we get together and always making sure everyone's okay and always, always, always. And I was so over it that I was resenting the shit out of my family, and I didn't want to. But I had to talk through what it was going to be like to let someone else do something, even if I didn't like their dumb idea and didn't like the stupid gift they wanted to get. I was still going to put in money and let them decide. So we have to be willing to give up something.
Yeah.
If we're not going to do all the things.
Yeah.
And you can't do all the things.
And I think you're giving up identity, an identity that you have rooted down and anchored as something of value and of worthiness in the world when you give up that hero child or hero boss or hero wife or hero whatever from your reality. So I'm curious then, asking for a friend, Terri, excuse me, really myself. If you are over-delivering and over-functioning, are you always a codependent person or not true?
Well, here's the thing. Very likely, it's very likely that there's codependency in there, because to be over-functioning in your relationships, you're trying to do something. When we over-function, really it's a covert way of controlling. We want to control the outcome. We want to control how that person feels. We don't want them to be upset. We want them to be happy.
Yeah.
So as much as we like to look at it, or this, for me, I like to be like, I'm just so giving. You know, back in the day before I got what was really going on, I was like, oh my God, no. I just don't like the way I feel when this person is in pain. I just want my anxiety to stop.
Yeah.
Wow, that changes it. I don't feel like Mother Teresa anymore. It doesn't feel so good to be so giving. So when you really think about it, the answer probably is a hard yes on that. And understanding what actual codependency is, you know that I created a term, high functioning codependency, because codependency itself was, my people didn't identify with that. They're like, oh, don't you have to be in a relationship with an alcoholic to be a codependent? Isn't it about enabling? No, it really isn't. My crew were like you, super high functioning. Are like me, super high functioning.
We're ballers in our work life. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And people think you have it all figured out.
Yeah.
So we want to have it all figured out. But what we're really doing is it's the same thing. When we're overgiving, we are trying to control the outcomes, the choices, the feeling states of other people.
Yep.
So that's a good way for people listening to be like, question your motives on what you're doing and why you're not drawing boundaries and why you're not speaking up and why you're not saying no when you want to say no. Yeah. Really look at that, because those are disordered boundaries, and that is high functioning codependency.
So all the things that Terri is talking about in today's episode, side note, you can find all of this in our show notes at thesimplifierspodcast.com. And I will also put a link to the episode that you did recently about codependency. Are you codependent or caring? Because I think it's a valuable listen. And she really starts to lay out practical tips that you can start to break that down. Because when I first listened to it and I first started to dive into that myself, I'm like, same, like codependent. No, that's not me. You don't even think that that's possible.
No, you're like, I do it all. How am I codependent? What?
Yeah.
I'm not dependent on anyone.
Right. But then when it starts to really simmer and seep in, at least for me, I go, well, hang on. What if there is some truth to this? And then what I think is empowering by that, it's not a shame spiral. It's empowering for me is to say, okay, what is my role in this relationship, whether it's with a spouse or a coworker or whatever? And what's my ish that I'm bringing to the table in this? And how do I begin to scoop out that and, figure out what I'm going to keep moving forward in my belief system and all that. So I highly recommend listening to that episode as well.
Great.
So Terri, we could talk for ages, but sadly I need to wrap up. And I feel like the next question I'm going to ask you is such a loaded question and maybe what we just reality is we need to bring you back for a part 2. But how in the world do we over-functioning, over-delivering, codependent women spot a narcissist and avoid getting into a relationship with one?
Well, you look for the signs. And I've done a million vlogs on this because this is a big problem. You look for the signs. If it's too much too soon, if you're being love bombed in the beginning, if someone is talking about getting married on the 4th date, that's a sign. If they in the beginning think you're perfect, say how perfect you are, nobody understands them like you. You're so amazing. You're so everything. You're so special. That's a sign. If they're just giving you gifts, expensive gifts, if they're whisking you away somewhere, that's a sign. Okay, so we have to look at if it seems too good to be true, probably 9 times out of 10 it is. And if you've been in relationships with narcissists in the past, you're even more of a target. So slow it down. And the way that you can tell, I'm going to give you one tip right now that this will have them out themselves early on so you don't end up in a relationship with them, is challenge them on something. It can be very, very light. Doesn't have to be a big deal. Challenge them. If they say they want to do something and you say, actually, no, I don't like that kind of food. I would prefer to do this. If you challenge them on anything, you will see it in their eyes. Whether they say anything or not, there'll be a shift in their energy. You will know that their ego has been bashed and that they will soon be punishing you. It's just a matter of time.
Gosh.
And how they love to punish. They love to be like, after everything I've done for you, like the worst. But challenge them early on. Make it be on your terms, a little bit. And you'll see that if you're not feeding their ego the way that they want you to, they're going to turn on you. They're going to reveal something that they don't want to. This is how you can knock them off balance.
Yeah, we have to have you back to talk about this because I feel like there is so much there that we need to unpack. Yeah. So we will bring you back in the new year, most certainly. So a couple of questions to wrap this up. And again, reminder to anyone that's listening, if any of this is really perking up your ears and you're going, oh my God, Terri is really talking to me and sharing some things that are hard. They're hard. But also, I think there's hope in this and that real love is possible. It's not just for the lucky few. It is possible for you as well. I highly recommend checking out her program called The Real Love Revolution. And like I said earlier, it's a 12-week program all online. So you can be anywhere in the world and tap into Terri's beautiful brain. And I've seen her videos. I've seen the work inside this course, and it is brilliant, brilliant. Highly recommend going to her website, terricole.com. And again, those links are in our show notes. So you can check that out and see if it's the right fit for you, if this is something that you're looking to do some work on in the new year ahead. Reminder also that she has a nice little gift for all of us. For our listeners, if you go to terricole.com/gift, it's the Raise Your Love Vibe 5-day challenge. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Terri?
Yeah, I actually chose like the 5 top issues women have around love. And so I decided each one of those days, so I give you something very doable to do on that day so that you can see an actual shift in your life in that moment. So it's 5 days of, you get the emails, you get the video, you get the instructions basically. And I can't tell you how many women who've done this have said, from that 5 days, my life changed.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's amazing. So I think you guys would love it.
Yeah, definitely check it out. And, sometimes it's nice to have little 5-day challenges that are bite-sized, just a bit, to not take the whole deep dive into this work, which is big, scary soul work.
Yes.
I'll tell you that from firsthand knowledge. But
Yep.
maybe a 5-day is a good start and tip into it. So, okay, Terri, a couple of questions before we wrap up that I like to ask everybody that's on the podcast. And again, thank you so much for your time today. I love going into this, even though it makes me cringe and it's hard, it's scary work. What's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes in your challenging your belief system?
Well, I'm really a huge fan of Dr. Harriet Lerner, is her name. She wrote a very famous book years ago called The Dance of Deception, The Dance of Anger, The Dance of Intimacy, and she has a book out right now called Why Won't You Apologize? And she's just super brilliant, and her work has really heavily influenced my work. I mean, I'm so fangirling out. I think she's going to be on my podcast. I'm about to have a heart attack. So her work, I think, would be super amazing for your listeners.
Yeah.
Because it's so much about relationships being a dance and how do we change our steps, and that changes the dance. Just beautiful.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes for that book, but it's called Why Won't You Apologize? Healing Big Betrayals and Everyday Hurts. Woof, that's a big topic there.
Gosh. So good.
So tell us, who's one person in your network, somebody that you know personally, that you just feel is up to brilliant things, and we could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast as well.
Actually, I really love what Lara Riggio is doing. And her website is just larariggio.com, which is LARARIGGIO. And she is an energy medicine expert. And that doesn't even do justice to what she is. But there's so many of your listeners probably, and my clients, my crew, who are highly sensitive people or empaths. I am myself. And it's like her work has been life-changing for me. And she's got so many free things out there too, where you can go to her thing, sign up for her to get her newsletter. And her stuff is so timely and interesting and easy. Everything is short. She gives you 3-minute videos on everything. And she's teaching you things that you can do right now in your life to lessen suffering and anxiety and to feel better now, which I love.
Love it. And, energy sucks, those energy vampires out in the world. That's true. It's a real deal thing. So we'll put a link in the show notes for her as well. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what's one thing you're grateful for today?
Always grateful for my hubs. Just partnership, friendship, joy, the life we've built. Like, it never gets old being grateful for having been found.
Yeah. So if people want to find you online, do you hang out in one place in particular? Instagram, YouTube? Where are you at?
I do both. Instagram and YouTube are my big ones. I also have a free group on Facebook called, Real Love Revolution with Terri Cole, I think it's called.
Great.
Just for women. And that is an ongoing, if you really want to up your psychological game, that's what we do. It's sisterhood, it's friendship, but it's also every week we're doing something. I'm getting you to think, imagine this podcast, but if it happened every day of the month.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. And I also have a community. I also have an actual community called Thrive Hive where we do, so it's a membership community where this is really like this every day of the month. So that's just, people, we can drop the link to that as well. If people are interested in that community, I would love to have you. So it's I think there's about 400 women in it at this point.
Yeah. And what I've learned over the last few years and really the last 20 is this life is never meant to be done alone. When we are in community with like-minded people and also people who are not like us, but challenge us to think deeper and greater, that's where a real rich life comes from. So yes, highly, highly agree. So my last question for you today is this, Terri. And again, thank you so much for your time. Somebody somewhere is listening to this episode and a couple of light bulbs have popped on and she's starting to realize, wait a second, what if I'm the problem? What if I am the constant in each of these negative situations? What's one last thing that you could just whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
Just realize that you're amazing. And I want you to actually take a moment, take 2 minutes to think back to all that you've already accomplished in your life, all the things you've already figured out. You are incredibly capable. Forget shame, forget guilt. Let this moment be a wake up. And instead of fighting for your limitations, recognize your strengths and know that whatever it is you want to do, you can. You just need a good GPS. That's it. You are very smart. So just don't be so hard on yourself and literally write a list of the things that you've already done to show yourself how capable and what a good friend and a good person you are. And now you're going to be that good friend and good person to you.
Good things are to come. Terri, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Mary. We'll do it again.
Yes.